Hello, I'm Jake Von Delinde, Director of Student Achievement in the Office of Educational Equity. Thanks for watching our Enrollment and Demographic Report for 2023. Here are some key goals and strategies that I believe are aligned to this report from our strategic plan. They are: our learners contribute to an equitable, caring society, we are a culturally responsive, inclusive, anti-racist district, and the community is united behind meeting student needs. This report is divided into two sections: the enrollment report, which provides updates on our current enrollment as of October 1st, and our demographic report, which provides information about who our students are as we begin this school year. Over the next several slides, I'll be sharing information regarding enrollment. This data comes from our enrollment office. It can be slightly different from the MDE October 1st enrollment reports, as the data from our enrollment office is updated more frequently in the fall. What you see on this slide is our enrollment trend over time. This data is taken from the same data source, meaning we're pulling from the same data from the same source year to year, so we're comparing apples to apples. You'll notice a jump in 2013 with the addition of Harambe. And if we look at enrollment trends across the last decade, there's a decrease in enrollment of about 250 students. There's also a more significant 3-year downward trend in student enrollment from 2019 to 2022, which is consistent with state data and correlates with the COVID-19 pandemic. As we look at 2023, we see a slight increase in enrollment. This slide shows our enrollment by grade level. Our elementary grade level cohorts range between 507 and 566. You may notice we have a smaller kindergarten cohort of 513 students and a larger graduating class of 635 students. We continue to see higher enrollment in secondary grades than elementary, which is typical. Our largest entry point for open enrollment is in 9th grade, which is typically due to private, homeschool, and open enrollment students transitioning to high school. This chart shows our K-6 enrollment data over time. If we look at elementary enrollment trends across a decade, while our enrollment from last year to this year was very similar, there has also been a decrease in enrollment of about 390 students over the last 10 years, which is something we're paying attention to and analyzing. This slide shows our secondary enrollment. As you can see, the enrollment has differed by less than a dozen students for the last 3 years and hovers right around 3,440 students. If we look across the last 10 years, we also see an increase of about 130 students. So while elementary has trended down, secondary has trended up. This is a look at each elementary school's enrollment. Most of our elementary schools have seen a decrease in enrollment since 2019, which correlates again with the pandemic. Schools that trended down from the previous year include Edgerton, Falcon Heights, Harambe, and Parkview. Schools that increased their enrollment include Brimhall, Central Park, Little Canada, and Emmett D. Williams. Both Little Canada and Emmett D. Williams have 3-year trends of increases in enrollment. This is a look at each secondary school's enrollment. For the most part, elementary enrollment trends at secondary are steady, with some decreases at Rams in the 5-year period. This is a look at our average class sizes. The far right column shows two numbers. The first number is the average class size for 2023-24, and the second number is the average class size for 2022-23. The numbers at the bottom are the district average for that grade level. The highlights are for the split classes. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the table, the overall district class size averages are slightly smaller this year when compared to last year. Currently, our district class size averages that you see in the bottom row are within the class size average. Our class size average targets are 22 for kindergarten, 26 for 1st through 3rd grade, and 31 in 4th through 6th grade. This slide illustrates the average class size for grades 7 and 8. The average from 2022 and 2023 is pretty similar in science and social studies, with the average class size decreasing slightly in language arts, math, and electives. This slide illustrates the average class size for grades 9 through 12. As you can see, there was a decrease in class size. This slide shows Roseville's class sizes compared to Metro EXU elementary schools. EXU stands for the Educational Cooperative Service Unit. Metro EXU's data is always a year behind and are based on a survey result from many districts in the Twin Cities metro area. What we notice in this slide is that we are relatively comparable and have not lost ground with EXU schools in the last 5 years. The same applies for middle school and for high school. We'll now shift to take a look at some key demographic areas for our students, including race and ethnicity, multilingual learners, special education, and educational benefits. The primary information for our demographic report comes from the preliminary Minnesota Automated Reporting Students System, or MARS. Special education data comes from Synergy, our student information system, and comparison school information comes from the Minnesota Department of Education Data Center. We'll start with a look at demographics by race and ethnicity across the district. Roseville continues to see increases in the percentage of students and families of color that we serve. About 10 years ago, our racial and ethnic composition was about 50% white and about 50% students of color. As you can see from this current graphic, our racial and ethnic composition is a little over 60% of students of color and just under 40% white students. This graph shows our enrollment over time by race and ethnicity. As I stated before, you can see the district's enrollment gap is closing between our white students and our students of color. Our enrollment for white students has continued to decrease at a rate of 84 students per year, and our enrollment of students of color has continued to increase at a rate of 134 students per year, reaching its peak in the 2017-2018 school year. As you can see, all of our student categories took a dip in the 2018-2019 school year. This is due to the introduction of the federal category 2 or more, which pulled from every racial and ethnic student population. We're seeing a slight increase in the enrollment of our Hispanic and multiracial student populations, a slight dip in the enrollment of our Black students, and our Asian student population remained about the same from last school year. During the 2000-2001 school year, white students made up about 79.6% of our student population, with 20.4% of the student population being students of color. 23 years later, white students make up 38.6% of our student population, with 61.4% of our student population being students of color. Our population of students of color has been growing steadily at a rate of 1.78 percentage points per year. Even though our district serves majority students and families of color, we have buildings with majority white student populations. This would include Falcon Heights at 64.9%, Emmett D. Williams at 58.6%, and Parkview at 51%. Buildings with the highest population of students of color include Edgerton at 85.8%, Harambe at 84.9%, Foz at 80.9%, and Central Park at 79%. As a side note, Edgerton and Harambe have both been identified as racially identifiable schools by the Achievement and Integration Program at MDE because their student of color population has been 20 percentage points more than the percentage of students of color for our district average. This bar graph gives you a view of BIPOC students by building over time. As you can see, Edgerton, Harambe, Foz, and Central Park have the highest bars, indicating they have the highest populations of BIPOC students. This chart shows another way to look at our BIPOC population at our buildings over time. During this 8 to 9 year period, you'll notice that the two schools with the biggest increase in BIPOC students are Ross and Parkview. This table shows a comparison to surrounding districts when it comes to our population of BIPOC students. We compare the most in enrollment size to Centennial, Spring Lake Park, White Bear Lake, and Burnsville-Egan-Savage. However, out of those 4 districts, only Burnsville-Egan-Savage has a higher population of students of color than Roseville area schools. We will now move to our multilingual learner demographics. We have an overall 1% increase in the total number of enrolled students qualifying for multilingual learner services. Currently, we have about 15% of our total enrolled students in our district qualify for multilingual learner services. As a district average, we had stayed right around that percentage for a number of years. This slide shows the trend of multilingual learners enrollment by building over time. Even though our district average is 15%, you can see the variance by school. Our school with the highest percentage of multilingual learner students is Edgerton with 36%, and our lowest is Falcon Heights at 8%. Our largest increases in that 5-year trend for multilingual learner enrollment come at Edgerton and Little Canada. This bar graph shows our multilingual learner population over the last 3 years after the pandemic. The largest increases over the 3 years include Foz, Rams, Edgerton, and Little Canada. We see the largest decrease at Central Park. In our Roseville area schools, we have about 2,588 students that speak a language other than English at home. Not all of these students need MLL services. We serve about 1,107 students in our multilingual learner program. This top chart includes the top 10 languages spoken at home other than English. This includes the total number of students whose families speak the language at home and the percent of that language in proportion of all languages spoken in Roseville. For reference, 65% of our students' home language is English. The bottom chart includes students who receive MLL services in our schools and the percentage of that population that speaks that particular language at home. This chart shows the different home languages spoken in our district and the numbers of students who speak that language at home. Over the next several slides, I'll be sharing information regarding students receiving special education services. Overall, we're seeing a 1.2% increase in students receiving services. Some things to take into account are that we have had an increase in students moving into the district with IEPs, and there's also been an increase in students going through the evaluation process. In this bar graph, we see the enrollment of special education students over a 3-year trend since the pandemic. 2 classrooms in our Communication Interaction Disorder, or CID program, were moved from EDW to Brimhall, which impacted enrollment for those 2 buildings. This slide shows the breakdown of special education enrollment by disability area. We serve the most students in specific learning disabilities, speech and language, and autism. We'll move into the educational benefits section. Just a reminder that educational benefits are the benefits that students receive if their family income is at or below certain thresholds. This can include free or reduced meals, transportation, athletics and activities, and other areas. This slide shows the percent of families that qualify for educational benefits. You can see that since 2007 we have continued an upward trend. In the last few years, from 2018 to 2022, we had been seeing a downward trend. These years also coincide with the pandemic, where we saw fewer completed forms for students who may qualify for educational benefits. Since 2021, we've seen a large increase. This slide provides a look at trend data based on our schools. Our district line is in orange along the middle and shows the variance in our schools, with many schools that are above or below that line. As you can see, almost all of our schools have seen an increase in families qualifying for educational benefits since 2007. This slide shows the same information as the previous slide, but in a bar graph and only for the last 3 years of data since the pandemic. As you can see, most of our schools saw large increases over the past 3 years. This slide is a shout out to all of our schools as we met or beat the odds for expected projections based on a study conducted by the Star Tribune. They used a linear regression analysis to compare each school's Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment proficiency rates for math and reading to expected proficiency rates based on the school's percentage of students on free or reduced price lunch. Schools were identified as falling short if the actual proficiency rate was 10 percentage points or more lower than the expected rate. Schools were classified as better than expected if their rate was 10 or more percentage points greater than the expected rate. All schools between these marks were categorized as met expectations. In Roseville, Edgerton, Emmett D. Williams, and Falcon Heights were identified as beating the odds in both reading and math. All other schools in Roseville met expectations. Before I end the screencast, I'd like to thank the folks that worked hard making this report possible. This is a large and comprehensive report that pulls data from many sources, so I'd like to send a shout out and thank you to Tina Clausen, Lindsay Most, Michelle Tessum, Delon Smith, Melissa Sonic, Jen Kruger, Niceta Thomas, and Luli Flores Hansen for their work in pulling data, presenting slides to the school board, and organizing this report. And thank you all for watching.